I often tell people the Arkansas River fishery was not born this way. It had to be created. And that was created through the involvement of a lot of people. And that whole story is actually very remarkable. Went from a very contaminated stretch of river that went beyond this area all the way down the Arkansas River to Pueblo. Now we have a gold medal fishery for 102 miles. It's the longest stretch of gold medal in the state of Colorado, and it extends from the Lake Fork all the way down to Parkdale, just above Canyon City.
Degradation of the California Gulch Superfund Site started in 1859 when gold was discovered in California Gulch. So over the next century, hazardous substances, including heavy metals, were transported downstream from California Gulch and deposited in on the banks and in the riparian area of the Arkansas River.
From Lake County down to Pueblo, the whole Arkansas River was impacted by the mining operations. The vegetation was heavily impacted. The animals were getting very sick. The local ranchers, specifically Doc Smith, brought to the attention of the EPA that issue. So the first major steps were to talk with the locals and the ranchers and the mining companies and determine what the extent of the contamination was and what was contributing to that.
It was Doc Smith that helped get us to the table to work together with mining companies and others to look and see what's going on with the river.
Our dad was very concerned about walking the talk. He would stand up and say, "I'll be a guinea pig, you can start here, use my place."
He and my mom felt it was important to involve the ranch itself and to provide the ranch as a place that demonstration work could be done, because he could see the impacts on the livestock. I think that intrigued him, and he wanted to connect the dots. I think he was also interested because he felt that there was a group of really dedicated scientists, part of the team from the very beginning, wonderful scientists who had come aboard to make the cleanup a reality.
There was a very marginal fishery up here, essentially a non-fishery. And as you move downriver towards Salida and beyond, that population down there was also impacted, but it was more of a chronic effect. So they weren't living past their third summer of life in the Salida area and downstream. So you'd get up to about a 12-inch fish, and then they were dying from bioaccumulation of heavy metals in the internal organs.
The amount of degradation and disturbance associated with the mining in the Arkansas River headwaters has resulted in impairment that has lasted decades, if not centuries. So that really points to the need and responsibility we have to be stewards of our natural resources to ensure that future generations can enjoy them.
So everything is connected, and so when you think about the release of hazardous substances from the Superfund site, say from the mining, really there's mine waste, there's tailings, so there's different ways that these pollutants can get to our natural resources, including fish and wildlife. So there's an air pathway, there's ingestion, there's direct exposure if you're a fish living in the water, and there's metals in the water. When you think about the exposure pathway, say for American dipper, which is a migratory bird that's one of our trust resources, the dipper has the same feeding niche as a trout. They dive under the water, walk on the rocks, and they pick off the macroinvertebrates and also eat small fish. So the dipper's getting exposed to the water directly, they're exposed to the sediments from any incidental ingestion of sediments, and then they're eating the macroinvertebrates that are living in and among the rocks and or small fish. So they have these different exposure pathways. Also, you could have, say, a small mammal that's feeding on vegetation that's growing at the edge of a mine waste deposit, and they're eating that vegetation, which is then pulling up the metals. And so there's that exposure route. And then we can have predators eating those small mammals, and on, those kind of trophic impacts.
Once remediation efforts started, like with treatment plants and the fluvial deposit to get rid of toxicity from fluvial tailings, then a lot of my effort was to document the recovery in the fish population. So my involvement as a fishery biologist had to do with aquatic wildlife resources and how they were impacted from heavy metal pollution. At the end of the day, not only did we need to show the impacts, but we needed to show recovery as it occurred. And when are you done? Basically, we used the brown trout population as the yardstick as to whether recovery was done or not. And the goal was to produce a stable, self-sustained brown trout population, so they needed to be able to reproduce and be able to grow and survive.
EPA was able to come in with our authorities and find out where the contamination was, who was contributing, and then to get the mining companies to clean up mine waste piles, slag piles, smelter operations. Specifically along the river, there was a lot of erosion due to the vegetation becoming barren and high water levels just running out the stream banks. And so it was heavily eroded, and it was just like a super highway of water going down.
A lot of soil mitigation was done where amendments were put into the soil to counteract all the heavy metal deposits that were there. Seeding was done, and over time, that has turned what was literally a moonscape. I mean, most of my life until the last 20 years, and all of our dad's life, nothing grew up there. Literally, the ground was a funny color, crusty, grasses didn't grow, and now there's almost no blank spots left.
Once recovery efforts happened and then we started to get natural reproduction occurring, they were able to survive clear to adulthood. You know, we ended up having fish that were surviving over 10 years up here in Hayden Flats that didn't occur before. After heavy metal cleanup and the response in the fishery, I mean, it opened up other management options. With natural resource damage settlement dollars, we were able to institute a large-scale physical habitat improvement project. Before, we wouldn't entertain that idea. Why would you build nicer homes for the fish if they couldn't survive?
Structures, primarily rocks, were placed into the river to create a more natural flow, riffles, pools, ponds, that resulted in it becoming a gold medal fishery.
Following completion of remediation of point and non-point sources of pollution, we saw dramatic improvement in water quality in the trout fishery. So much so that over 100 miles of the Arkansas River was designated as a gold medal trout waters in 2014.
And so to become a gold medal fishery, basically from the headwaters near Leadville, almost 120 miles downstream in the Arkansas River, is a really big success story. And we've just been building on that success story from the water quality standpoint. And then we, as the Natural Resources Trustees, have come in and done the in-stream habitat restoration, making it better for the fish, because initially when we started the restoration, we had kind of long, skinny fish, and they were having to use a lot of energy to just maintain their lifestyle, if you will. And so the habitat restoration gives them better resting holes and places to get away, and then it also gives the younger fish places to get away from the bigger fish that are trying to eat them. And we have much more variety of habitat types. Instead of one big riffle, we have the pools, we have holding water, we have riffles that are well oxygenated, really good for the bugs. It's a pretty cool thing to see, and to see the vegetation grow where we've not had vegetation before. So that's a benefit to the terrestrial species, as well as kind of some of those crossover or maybe more aquatic dependent species, because it's right near the river.
Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been monitoring fish populations and water quality since the 1980s as part of our mission to perpetuate the wildlife resources of the state. Those monitoring data were instrumental in documenting damages to the natural resource, which led to both the designation of the Superfund site, and a $20.5 million settlement under the Natural Resource Damage Assessment provisions of CERCLA.
That settlement agreement in the Natural Resource Damages Program has been a real big benefit to organizations like mine and other organizations in this valley to really generate funding to improve not only just the Arkansas River, but a lot of the tributaries that are very important to the Ark and the surrounding communities. So, I mean, Trout Unlimited has completed projects up in Evans Gulch, in the Sugarloaf Mining District. We're working on projects right along the banks of the Ark down valley here at Hayden Meadows, and some of the fluvial tailings that were left over from OU11, in addition to the Sherman mine and the headwaters of Iowa Gulch. And that work has really set the stage for a lot of this NRD funded work that is happening now, and that has been happening. So partners like Lake County, Lacosi, TU, Arwick, Central Colorado Conservancy, CMC, and others have really used this funding that's come from NRD to build on a lot of the projects and the work that EPA has done over the years to continue that improvement of the environmental conditions of the Arkansas rivers.
So this was a huge collaborative effort among federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies, ranchers, farmers, community members, and agencies like Trout Unlimited, Lake County Open Space Initiative. We can't do our work without having input and knowing what's happening on the ground here, and the locals are the best ones for that.
And one of my fondest memories is of Doc Bernard Smith on the Smith Ranch, and that we were able to get habitat restoration work implemented and done before he passed. And for him to shed a tear that he didn't think he would ever see the work in his lifetime is probably one of the most satisfying things.
You know, it takes a long time to do something of this magnitude, and he stuck in there and was, pounded the table when he needed to, and motivated people, and got people to get it done.
His philosophy was, let's not litigate. Let's have a cup of coffee together, and let's talk about how to be practical about this. Let's work out a reasonable, sensible solution.
We're all in it together, and I think that was one thing that was recognized decades ago, is that we all needed to be around the table together, and that included EPA and the mining companies and the natural resource trustees and local entities. And I think that was really part of the strength of it. It can be done, it's being done in other places, and I think, again, we all inspire each other, as we should.
I think what we've done here in Leadville and in Lake County is a great example of what can be done in other areas and needs to be done in other areas. The Conservancy, with the help of other organizations, was able to protect 600 acres of the headwaters of the Arkansas. And that is so important for everybody that enjoys the river downstream. Anglers, boaters, recreation, wildlife, people, industry, agriculture. And if we can replicate that same effort in other places in Colorado and elsewhere, we do ourselves and our environment a service.
CPW has been conducting creel surveys to look at angler use within the Superfund site. And what we've seen is a 300% increase in angler use since completion of the remediation project, and an over 50% increase in angler use since completion of the restoration project. On average, an angler spends about $130 a day when they go fishing. So that translates to a substantial economic input to local communities. Our last survey was in 2020, and we estimate that anglers contributed over $1.5 million when fishing in the Arkansas River headwaters.
The message I would share with the general public about the work that's been done here is pretty much the proof is in the pudding. I mean, if you have a goal in mind, find those people who share that goal. And if it takes 40 years, if it takes 50 years, hang in there. My dad, I don't believe, thought he would see a gold medal fishery on the dead Arkansas River in his lifetime. And I have to tell you, that is nothing short of a miracle.